You're listening to the Epic All Day podcast with Jim Simcoe. I'm here to help you make your life epic, so let's get rolling with the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Epic All Day podcast. This is Jim Simcoe. Thank you so much for checking out the show. Very excited. We have our Hero Up Summit event coming up very soon, so I'm super excited to have one of our expert speakers on the podcast today, Dr. Jenn Gunsaullus, sexologist and sociologist. How are you, Dr. Jenn?
I am doing fantastic. Thanks, Jim.
Good. Now, we've had you on the show before. It's actually one of my most popular podcasts.
Yay!
Everybody loves the topic of sex and love and relationships. I was talking to someone the other day and he's like, I've seen all your podcasts and there's like 4 of them that I love. And this sex one is by far the best one. And I was like, oh, cool. Thank you so much.
Yay. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. That's awesome.
And you'll actually meet him because he's actually going to be at the event and he's actually one of the other speakers. So,
sweet.
Yeah. And the event's gearing up to be pretty cool. Pretty excited about it. For those of you interested in checking out the event, check out heroupsummit.com, heroupsummit.com, and that'll tell you a little bit more about it. But why don't we get into what we wanted to talk about? So, in our very first podcast, we talked about, we started getting into sex and relationships and intimacy and some of those things. And so I wanted to revisit some of those topics. And I really wanted to start, maybe you can tell everyone a little bit about what you do and your work in this field.
Yeah. So, my background is as a sociologist. I have my Ph.D. in sociology with a specialty in sex and gender. So, that means, my foundation in education and approach to sex and intimacy and relationship topics is through the lens of, what have we learned about these topics growing up? And where did we learn them? What did we learn it means to be a woman or a man, or masculinity and femininity? And where have we taken on those roles? Where have we happily taken them on? Where have we been forced into them? And where does it, both benefit us sexually, and where does it interfere with our ability to be sexually expressed? So, I have that foundation as a sociologist, and then I've really, the past 14 years been on my own personal journey around spirituality and mindfulness and personal transformation and yoga and meditation, and a very mind, body, spirit approach to my own personal growth. And then applying that to all of the work that I do. So at the core of my work is mindfulness and compassion. And so because, we all have some sort of hang-ups or issues around our bodies and sexuality and intimacy and communication. Yeah. Unless we can shine a bright light on exactly what's happening in the moment when we get triggered and what those belief systems are and where they came from, it's hard to do anything different. So yes, I apply that. I do, individuals and couples counseling, kind of a version of coaching, counseling, and education in a private practice. My real passion is public speaking in lots of different venues, and writing and media work. So big picture, sex education. We don't have many spaces where we can be really open and honest and vulnerable, and not shamed and judged. Right. For our rawness of who we are as sexual beings. And that's really my purpose and mission, is to create those safe spaces for men and women. Which
is so cool. I think that this is what your work is so cool. And I think it's one of those things where I think it should be required in the school system, from the high school to the college level. Because I can't tell you one thing I learned in economics freshman year in college, and I think what you teach and what you talk about would have been so helpful back then. Because I think you're right. I think so many people are either, they've got body issues, body image issues, or they've, repressed sexually in some level, one way or the other. It's something, and I think it plays out in other aspects of life. I think there's a lot of times when I can be in a meeting with 4 or 5 people, and I'll look at one person, and I'll be like, wow, this person, just needs to get laid because they are so uptight and so crazy and just so they have something else is going on outside of that. And it's, this is obviously a not safe for work podcast. Do not be listening to this on speakerphone around kids or anywhere else. So I think it's super cool, and I think it's a topic that no one really wants to. I think it's one of those topics that's really interesting because it's something that everybody wants to know about, but nobody wants to ask, right? Like it's
right. And I think people don't even know what we don't know.
Right.
And sometimes or what to ask. And I was thinking about, what you said, like your economics class. A lot of our education and what we deem most valuable for public education is very disconnected and disembodied. And it creates us to be like walking brains, walking heads. But we're like, what's the real thing that matters is like our heart connection to other people, our
Right.
ability to be vulnerable and authentic and self-express. Like that's the stuff that really feeds people in life. That's the stuff on their deathbeds, that
Right.
their regrets that they have if they didn't have the courage and give themselves the permission and the space to feed that in life. Yet we get trained out of we get trained in the opposite of that. And we're not, it takes skills to really be mindful and present with other people and have really uncomfortable conversation or to request your needs and to negotiate around that. That takes a lot of nuance and skills and awareness of yourself and awareness of the other human in front of you. We don't get that training anywhere. Often people
Right.
don't get it till like their marriages are breaking down,
Right.
and the thing that's most important to them, it's dying. And, and then they show up in counseling and they have to undo all of this stuff and then start to try to learn these skills.
Right. It's kind of funny. Like I have a couple of friends who've, I've talked to about, their relationships or whatever. And, I had one person say, like, look, I just don't know how to please my wife. I don't know what she wants. I don't know, like, our intimacy isn't great. And my thing with him was, I was like, well, have you ever asked her? And he was like, no. And he's like, I don't even know what to ask. Like, I don't even know I wouldn't even know where to start. And I was like, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to record a podcast with Dr. Jenn and listen in and maybe you can figure it out. So, and what's funny about that is typically, when I'm recording a podcast, I like to send all the guests, I send them questions usually the day before, the day of or whatever. So they're a little bit prepped, just like I did with you. In most podcasts, I have, kind of 20 or 30 questions that I narrow down to about 10 and that I think they'll be most valuable. And this podcast, very much like our first podcast, was a very difficult podcast to come up with what questions I wanted to ask because it's kind of like what you were saying. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. So you're just, so I'm kind of like, I think these are good questions. These are the kind of questions that, that other people have had that, that I think would be important. But anyway, so let's go, I'm going to go right into that. So tell me, how important do you think, how important is a healthy sex life, a healthy intimacy with your partner? How important is that to a relationship and to a marriage? Is it actually important? Do we really need it, or is this just all talk?
It's funny. I think it depends on the couple. And I think it depends on each individual in it and then how you are as a couple, because I have seen couples, very healthy, loving, communicative, respectful,
right,
fulfilled couples, with or without kids, who do not have sexual intimacy. They have cuddling and they have closeness and they have emotional and intellectual intimacy, but not sexual intimacy. And I would say these are incredibly healthy couples. And neither of them are missing it. And that's the important piece.
Okay.
Because if one or both of you is missing that intimacy, if the way you most feel loved and connected is through sexuality, if that's how you express yourself, if that's how you feel seen and acknowledged, if that's how you feel nurtured, if that's the thing that is most special with you that you can only have with that person that you're in relationship with, and then you start to lose it, that's going to be really problematic.
Right. So
that's where it comes down to. So I think you can be healthy and fine with it, but one or if both people miss it. The other thing is if it's missing and you don't really quote unquote miss it, but that's because you've had, trauma in your past or you're sort of shut down around it.
Sure.
Then that's another piece of looking at why is it not in your relationship, and is it problematic or not? And is this something, that can be addressed and should be addressed? So, but yeah, I mean, for the couples that are able to maintain it in a way that feels good to both of them and fulfilling to both of them, I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, it roughs it. How do I want to describe this? It smooths. Thank you. I'm like, it's not a big word. I'm trying to think of smooth. It smooths the edges of a relationship. When you both want it and when you both get into it and connect that way, because those little things that were bothering you before don't matter so much anymore.
Right.
And so in that way, the fact is that, mostly in our society, we have heterosexual relationships. We have men and women under one roof. I don't know that we were designed to really do that long term.
Right.
And to actually like each other and then to still feel passion. And then that person's supposed to be your all and your everything. And like, that's impossible. Pretty much our romantic notion of marriage and long-term relationships isn't really based in biology and the socialization of males and females. But if you can maintain that sexual piece, it make living together a whole lot easier.
Right. Now, do you think, you brought up something I think is important to touch upon, because I feel like, like if someone is really into a sexual relationship and is like, that's really, really important to them, I feel like there are times when the other partner could say like, oh, all this, all she wants is sex, or all this person wants is sex. And they almost, they don't, they make it less than, they don't make it as important or they make light of it more than anything else and say that it's not important. But basically what you're saying is like, look, if like sex is your way of expressing intimacy and your way of connecting mindfully, then it does become an important thing. And it's not something that's just this base function of being a human.
Yeah. And that's why, I really love using the book, The 5 Love Languages, and that, free test online, because, you can just be like, geez, really? Like we have such a great relationship, and we take care of each other, and sex is what is all you're clamoring for? Like, is that all I am to you? And when you realize, no, that's their love language. Like that's how they feel connected. That's how they feel nurtured and seen. And because otherwise they hear that you love them, but they actually don't feel loved. Like, that's a whole nother standard. And it puts it on a plane of not just some, base raw animal physical need, but like, no, this is how I deeply connect with another human being that I love and care for.
What I love about that book too, and it's called The 5 Love Languages, and I read it a long time ago. What I love about that book is it really gives you permission to be okay with however you like to be loved, like whatever the way is. And it's also, I think, so enlightening and also, pretty basic, but really enlightening in the fact that it forces you to realize that your partner doesn't necessarily want to be loved the way that you're currently loving them, and that they're different people and they want something, totally different. I've used this example before, but I know like in the very beginning of my marriage to Kelly, I was always kind of giving her positive affirmations and bringing her flowers and doing the things that, that I enjoyed and that were part of my love language. Right. And really at that time, because I think love language has changed, but at that time, our daughter was only a year old. What she really wanted were acts of service. And like, she wanted me to like empty the dishwasher and put my, put my shoes away. And when after we read the book and I kind of figured that out, I was like, wow, my life is so much easier now, because not only have I been spending all this extra time and effort to do the things that don't resonate with my wife, but the things that she actually needs from me are so easy. They're so simple. So I was like spending all this extra time and money trying to like, knock it out of the park, when it was just like, she was just like, hey man, empty the dishwasher occasionally, put your shoes away. Like, and it just really makes relationships so much easier when you know what that is. And I think that's a common theme, is like, I think a lot of people just don't spend the time asking, and it's kind of like, when you're going somewhere and you're driving around, you don't know where to go. It's like, well, you fire up GPS and you fire up Waze and Google Maps and you figure it out. You don't drive around endlessly looking for something.
Well, and I think it comes down to that it never occurs to us to think about different ways that love is expressed.
Right. Oh, right. Totally true.
Or different ways that we feel love. We just because love, it's so crazy abstract, and, you might learn about it in a psychology class in this really sort of detached way. But really, what is it to feel it, and what is it to express it? And so we don't get a deep self-reflection on that. And what are our own needs, and when do I feel most loved? And how do I define that? And then it doesn't even occur to you then that other people might have different answers.
Yeah, what are the odds of that? Wait a minute. I mean, other people might not love the Chili Peppers the way I love them, or love the Patriots. Wait, other people have opinions too? Wow, what a world.
But that's such a great context to put it in, right? It is like personal taste.
Yeah.
But we don't think of it because love is this, abstract thing that, musicians and poets and artists and everybody talks about and writes and paints and croons on, and it touches us. But the actual application of it, requires some reflection on the nitty gritty of it, and
right.
some detailed questions and conversations, and getting uncomfortable because it's vulnerable to ask for your needs, because then, you might not think you're worthy of it if you ask for it, and your partner might not give it to you. And then that hurts a whole lot more.
Right, right.
So, yeah, it's a lot of stickiness around it.
Yeah, that is true. So what are tell me, what are the, because you've worked with tons and tons of people, and you've been doing this, and I know you travel around the world giving these talks. What are some of the common intimacy, sex life, relationship problems you see with people in relationships? And one of the reasons I wanted to ask this question is because I feel like a lot of times in relationships, when you have problems, you really feel alone. Like you feel like, oh, no one else has this problem. It's just us. I'm the only one who feels this way. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you see on a pretty regular basis that are problems that people have in their relationships?
Yeah, one of the most common ones is couples in long-term relationships that have mismatched desire levels. And so,
okay. What do you mean by that?
Like early on, often, everybody's kind of hot and heavy,
yeah.
and you're excited. And that's really the neurochemicals. Like we are wired like that as animals to, neurochemically get this wonderful cocktail around lust and desire and excitement and newness and mystery and sexual exploration and this, raw vulnerability of sharing your body with someone else. And then, it could be 8 months, it could be a year and a half, it could be 3 years. Usually within that time period, it starts to shift. And if your relationship has made it that long, then, and they've actually done, fMRI brain scans on this of like, it's love, early quote unquote love, and like long-term love light up really different areas of our brains.
Okay.
Because that newness, that beginning, that excitement, that mystery, that uncertainty, that anxiety, all of that around what new love is, and that's, feeds passion. And then long-term love is commitment. It's stability. It's safety. It's trust. It's a deep knowing. All of the things that are quite opposite of passion.
Yeah. So, so that's interesting. So it's actually two different. So they've done studies, and it's actually two different levels of love, or different types.
Yeah, or different versions. And one is kind of easy, in that the neurochemicals are running the show, and the longer term one is a lot more like, reflection and commitment and communication, and like, okay, do we really want to, now we might have to work on this. And do we have what it takes to do that?
Right.
And so we're only taught and ever shown really, in Hollywood movies and Cosmo articles, that early version of lustful desire and love.
That's one of the reasons I stopped reading Cosmo, quite frankly. It's like, I just couldn't deal with it anymore. I was like, I'm going to go back to Men's Health because this Cosmo stuff is ridiculous.
You're like, I still like the pictures, but yeah. So, and so we're ill prepared for that. We're also taught a romantic notion of like, well, if we do everything right and we treat this person right and we've got this chemistry and we commit to them, great, we get to have sex whenever we want it.
Right.
And then what happens when?
Well, that's in the brochure, right? That's in the brochure they sell you in high school. Like this is,
yeah,
this
I
is
know.
it.
Yeah, basically, exactly. Yeah. So, and then it's like, okay, whenever you like, no, your body is no longer yearning for sex or asking for it. What the hell do you do? Because
Right.
it's like coming up to a buffet and you're like, yeah, no, I'm like not hungry, like at all. Like it feels bad putting food in my mouth.
Right.
And it's like your partner's like, yeah, but you like this food. Come on, you want this food in your mouth.
Right.
And you're like, well, shit, I used to want that. And I know it makes you feel good to feed me. And so what's wrong with me? And then I feel guilty. And then you just, never show up to the buffet again because it's just
it's too much of a hassle.
Yeah. And discomfort. And you don't know what's wrong. And neither side. And it's interesting. I just had this conversation with a male friend of mine last night. We were talking about how for many men in that position, then they'll say, well, the woman in my life and she has less desire than me and she holds all the power. She's the gatekeeper because we only have sex when she wants it. And so he feels rejected and he feels not loved and he feels resentful of that. But I have yet to speak to a woman in a low desire position who feels powerful in that position.
Really? What do they feel? Do they feel?
They feel guilt. They feel horrible that they're rejecting their partner. They feel like they're broken in some way. They feel, they just feel a lot of guilt and and shame and have no skills of what to do with it. And because then their husband brings up the topic or their, partner, as they have a right to do, the higher desire person, like, hey, I still have this need. What's going on with this? And the other person either, the low desire person lashes out in anger or just shuts down because we have no skills with how to sit with such horrible feelings that we have because of what we feel like we're doing to the person we love the most.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say, the biggest thing that I see is that long-term mismatched desire. And it's just fraught with so many heavy negative emotions, and a lot of them because we're not taught to talk about sex. We're not taught how to negotiate our needs. We're not taught how to think outside the box.
Right.
And really be creative in our sexual expression with our partners and how to, mindfully sit with the feeling of rejection, the feeling of guilt, the feeling of shame, stay present in those really awkward, uncomfortable conversations, gain resiliency and sitting in that discomfort. And then starting to have some really authentic and vulnerable conversations about, okay, what can we do differently? Yeah.
And that kind of rolls right into my next question is like, so that vulnerability part, and it seems to me, and again, I'm not a PhD. I'm your usual normal stupid guy. But it seems like so much of this comes down to being willing to be vulnerable, and then also willing to communicate with your partner about these things. So how for you, what are some tips you can give people? How can people be more open with their partners about what they want sexually or what they need from an intimacy level in a relationship?
Yeah. I mean, a bunch of things. The first thing that comes to mind is one, like, if you don't know what your triggers are around these topics and what your fears are and what your shames are and what your insecurities are, they're going to be unwittingly triggered when you're going into these difficult conversations. So I think a first step is really sitting down and doing some reflection and writing on your own of, like, okay, this is, even starting first, like, this is what sex means to me. This is what not having sex means to me. This is what it feels like. This is how it hurts me. This is my interpretation of that. This is what rejection feels like really getting into the nitty gritty of that discomfort And also, I mean, when I guide couples through this and say, a men specifically, it's interesting sometimes how their version of sex and their sexual needs kind of got stagnated as teenagers and never evolved past sort of like a 17-year-old boy.
Yep. I probably agree with that statement 100%.
And so getting clear of like, oh, okay, some of my sexual needs are a little
dated.
I was going to say
like
immature.
A pager or an 8-track or a Sony Walkman.
Exactly.
We're all stuck in the Star Wars era.
They were good in the 80s.
Yep.
But what's it look like to have a more, mature and nuanced version of being a sexual man and connecting with your partner in that way? So yeah, getting really clear on where, where you're stuck and what your beliefs are and where your insecurities are. And because if you can't, if we can't sit with our insecurities, then we're not going to be able to go in and have this vulnerable conversation in the way that we need.
Right. And do you think, like to your point about knowing your triggers and fears and shames and insecurities and beliefs, do you think that once you've sort of nailed that down or figured that out, is it important at that point to tell, to share that with your partner, or is that something that it is?
Well, I mean,
I was hoping you were going to say no, so I would. Okay.
You should hide that away with shame in a little compartment.
I have plenty of things hidden in shame. Starting with my fashion sense, tank tops forever, many things. My musical taste.
So funny. I was just because the picture of you that I'm seeing on our Skype call is you in a tank top.
Of course. Why would Skype treat me any differently than everybody else? Everyone just assumes I wear tank tops all the time, in the shower, you name it, wherever.
Well, you put that picture up here.
It's mainly true. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay. So I guess I should say first and foremost, like, we need to make sure we're in a partnership that we can be vulnerable,
Okay,
and if
interesting. Okay.
If you're not, then that's really something important to look at.
Okay.
Because then you just need to get into counseling and have someone that can safely facilitate these conversations for you. Because otherwise, if you feel like it's not safe, for either person in it, because there's a reason we have armor up and we protect ourselves and we don't want to be raw and exposed, is because we're afraid of being judged or rejected or shamed or ridiculed. And if you have a partner that's their kind of go-to, if you're sharing something really personal and deep, then no, you shouldn't be vulnerable with them.
And I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that's really good real world advice. I mean, I think that's, crucial. I mean, I've been in relationships before where there really wasn't trust and there wasn't that sense. And I remember, being open and honest and really vulnerable about certain things. And it really came back to bite me. And then after the relationship ended, I was like, well, why the hell did I tell her that? Like, I knew ahead of time, like, she wasn't really the kind of person I could trust with that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I think that's key.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if, this relationship is worth working on and getting to that point, and particularly if you have children, then go to counseling, get the skills in that and have somebody that creates the safe space for that. Because otherwise you don't want, oh my God, like it's the worst thing to be really raw and vulnerable and share something that's so uncomfortable and then to have it thrown back at you.
Oh God.
Or that the person teases you about it.
Oh, really? Do you see people do that?
Well, I mean, as a heterosexual woman, I date men, and men are known to joke about things that they shouldn't joke about sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
And make light of things because that's what they do when they're uncomfortable.
Yep.
So I've definitely, and good loving men in good relationships have done that to me before. And and gratefully, I have the confidence and the strength and the, sense of self to be like, dude, like, seriously? Did you wait, we can swear on this podcast, right?
You know what? I hope so, because I've been swearing for 53 episodes. So if we can't, I'm going to be out of a job.
I usually don't drop the F-bomb, and I was about to, and I was like, wait a second, I could do that.
Believe me, the name of this podcast is probably going to be like something like sex talk, intimacy lessons, or whatever. So right away, people are going to know this is not something to listen to, again, on speakerphone, around kids, in a school cafeteria, in a police station, whatever. So yeah, you can swear.
So yeah, no, I was just like in those moments, and because I do tend to swear a lot, I'm like,
which is healthy. It's very healthy. You read the Harvard study about it. Swearing, people who swear are healthier than other people.
We didn't say they're smarter too, or something.
They said that they're smarter and they're better looking. They're better looking, smarter, charming if they swear more. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not,
Just saying.
It's a fucking fact. What can you do?
So yeah. So when I've been in those situations before, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that was a really uncomfortable thing I shared with you. I'm like, and I will own, because I practice so much mindfulness. I'll be like, dude, way to fucking make me feel shame right now. And I'm like, and I'll feel it like in my chest and in my gut. And like, that's shitty. And then, and I could probably be a little more tactful in the way, I call them out on it, but like, shit, I'm happy that I'm able to just own what's happening in the moment and call it out as inappropriate. And then they're like, oh shit, you're right. No, I should not have done that.
Yeah.
So anyway, in general, you want to know it's a safe space to start these vulnerable conversations. And then, I don't know, did I answer your question? Or
yeah. I think basically, it seems like if you are good at knowing yourself and what your triggers are, your shames, insecurities, and beliefs, that's the first thing, it seems like. And the second thing is to kind of validate your partnership and make sure that there's trust there and it can be a safe space. And then it sounds like after that, the real big thing is to open the conversation.
Yeah. And you mentioned a friend that you had said to, you're like, well, have you asked your wife? And he's like, no, I don't even know how to do that.
I'm a genius with other people's relationship. I am an absolute genius with other people. In my own, sometimes I'll be like, oh, she asked me to put that thing away 4 times. I still haven't done it. And she's mad now. I'm like, oh, I wonder why. It's like,
right, exactly.
Clueless on my own, but good with everybody else.
Well, and so I like this, so I'm going to brainstorm sort of organically in the moment here. Like if I was to give somebody, like if that your friend was in front of me and I was to on the spot give him, 4 questions or something like that to start this conversation. I think the first one I would say is, and I mentioned this before, like, what does sex mean to you? Like, what's your motivation for when you do have sex, and what's it mean to you? And that's super telling, because you can have one person that's like, oh, it's like loving and connected. And the other person's like, oh, it's just sort of fun and it scratches an itch and is stress relieving. Well, those are totally different energies that you're bringing to. And like, no wonder you may not be matching up.
Right.
When you want to have sex. So what's it mean to you? And then what's it mean to you to not have sex? And, for the higher desire person, they're often like, well, I feel sad. I feel rejected. I feel, not loved. And the lower desire person is often like, I feel relieved. I feel like, except then when we do have it, I can check a box and then I don't have to worry about it for another while. So that's the first place to start. And then, maybe, and these things may be easier to actually have each of you write it down first and then share it with each other.
Right.
So that you have time to organize your thoughts. So you could have these 4 questions, then you each, you read the question, you each write it down, and then you share it. And then the next one could be something along the lines of, when do you feel most, sexually turned on by me?
Right.
And then when do you feel most sexually turned on just on your own? And then what, so there's a fantastic book by this author called Emily Nagoski.
Okay.
And it's called Come As You Are. I think it is the best book on female sexuality in forever.
Okay.
And understanding it. And so she talks about,
I'll put this in the show notes. What's your last name?
Nagoski. I'll message. If you look up "Come As You Are," you'll see it.
Okay.
And she talks about the concept of desire as accelerators and brakes.
Okay.
And that often, and so when we talk about adding desire and passion and in creating more or refinding that, we often say how to spice up your sex life. Here, do this, put sexy lingerie on, like all these things that are supposed to be accelerators.
I can never find lingerie in my size. It's the only problem.
They have some pretty sexy tank tops out there.
hey, woman, every tank top is a sexy tank top.
Maybe a nice crop top.
Oh, God. Anyway, go ahead.
Wait, no, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So we often focus on the accelerator part of it. And I think, honestly, that's a more masculinity male version of sexuality to focus on that. If you really want to understand women's sexuality and desire overall, we need to look at the brakes. And what is it that suddenly, like, you're starting to get sexual with your partner, and then all of a sudden you're like, you just want to shut down or pull away. And often both of you feel that energy and nobody knows what the hell just happened.
Yeah.
But it's because, he reached down and he was like, touched your belly, and you feel like you're heavier than you want to be, and you feel self-conscious in your belly, and all of a sudden you're not in the sexual moment, and all of a sudden you're feeling shut down because you feel self-conscious in your body image.
Right. And then he's like, what happened?
Right. And you don't even necessarily know what happened. And so, like, I have a young couple, probably early 30s, that I've been working with. Probably I had them read this book maybe 6-8 months ago, and it's been profound for them because now both of them read the book, and now both of them recognize in the moment when a break gets hit, and she'll be like, oh, he'll be like, something just happened, and she'll be like, yeah. She goes, oh, I think it was this. And he'll be like, oh, okay, what can I do differently? And then they move forward. And It's like this beautiful teamwork approach. And they feel so empowered. He feels empowered because he can communicate about it and they can figure out a path forward. She feels empowered because she doesn't feel broken in her desire in a long-term relationship. So, like getting clear and reflecting, and that might take time because, if I just ask people, what are your accelerators and what are your brakes, they don't necessarily know. But now if they study themselves over a month and they read the book, then they can make a list up. And even, before going into a sexual encounter, you're like, okay, your partner's like, okay, I'm really turned on. We haven't been close in a while. I'd really like to have some sexual intimacy. Let's go out to dinner. Let's have some drinks. Let's do this. And I've talked to women thinking about like, okay, what are my brakes? What's getting in the way? How can I address them? How can I enlist his help in addressing what these barriers that are in the way? And then how can I be open? Then if I can address those, then I can be open to the energy of connecting and quality time and adult time and feeling taken care of and connected as we're together tonight. And the kids are at a sleepover, so that's not in the back of my mind that, when we come home, the babysitter's leaving and then we have to try to have sex and the kids are there, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, but you need to get really detailed in what all of those are. And then kind of address them in a systematic way. So
yeah, what's interesting about a lot of what you're saying is it seems like it's, what they kind of teach you in high school is like, okay, you're going to meet the love of your life. You'll be very attracted to that person. That person will be super attracted to you for the rest of your life. You're just going to have sex whenever you want to have sex. They're always going to want it. You're always going to want it. It's going to be super easy. You're not going to have to think about it. And it'll be one of the easiest parts and most pleasurable parts about your life. And then you become an adult and you realize like none of that really is true. Like it's all totally different. So it's cool. But what's cool about everything you're saying is it's almost like it's like this issue that, you're really interested in solving and figuring out, and hopefully your partner for whatever reason is also interested in solving and figuring out. So there's almost a kind of like a fun game attached to this. So it's not like you're like,
oh yes,
it's there's a difference between like, okay, I'm driving from here to Texas. in the next week and I have to figure out like everything I need to pack and what I'm going to wear for travel and everything else. Like that's not as fun. But if you're like working with someone and in some ways increasing your intimacy by doing this, it does become a fun experience. I think it seems like it would.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a really key point of the intention and the energy that you're bringing to sexually working on your relationship. Are you coming in with dread and fear of messing up or not doing something right or of trying something new or that it's not going to work? Or of being rejected, or all of those. And like all of those things are, barriers, or they're putting the brakes on, because ideally what we want to be able to show up in is open-hearted, connected, exploratory, and playful.
Right.
Like that energy is fantastic, because then if you try something new and it's a total fuck up and you're like, then at the end you could be like, you high five your partner. You're like, yay for us that we had the courage to try something new and we will never fucking do that again. Awesome.
So great.
And you just learned something new. You could probably laugh about it later. You don't want to try it again. And that's okay. We have to give ourselves the permission to explore like that and to mess up and to not be good at things.
Right.
And or that our partner's like, oh my gosh, that was horrible. And you're like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, dude, no, I'm in this. Like we both tried it. Like I don't blame you.
And I think that's key. If there's no blame and it's a partnership, and then I think it becomes a different deal. Like if it's one person on their own trying something and then the other person gets all pissed off, then the first person is kind of out on an island, and they're by themselves, which makes it less likely that they want to try other stuff or be more vulnerable or whatever. So it seems like it's a snowball effect. But I like that idea of thinking of it more as like a partnership and as a team, and allowing room for exploration and allowing room for mistakes and screw ups. I think that's really key.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Of course. Yeah.
I
don't even know why I'm talking. You should just talk the entire time.
So this is funny. I'll share something personal. Because the reason I mentioned that component of it is because I just had a conversation last night with a man that I am newly sort of sexually engaged with. And
this guy's going to love hearing this podcast. I can't wait to get his comment on iTunes.
I can only. I don't know. I think the last time you interviewed me too, I was talking about a different man.
Yeah.
So apparently, I'm out and about in San Diego. And so we were very new to sort of hanging out with each other and some sexual exploration. And so we did some this weekend, a few days ago, and we were actually just talking about it last night. On the phone, and he said something about, I don't know how personal I want to get in this podcast, but there's like certain things that I like in a very intense way. And as a man is learning my body, he can feel like he really could be hurting me. And it's not. And so he was voicing and it was really beautiful for me to hear. He's like, it was so intense. And he goes, and it was so like we were melded with each other, but he's like, I needed to be so attuned to your body and to your breathing and to your twitches and to your changes. And he's like, and so like in that moment with this like, tense thing we're doing. And he's like, because he goes like, I really took it seriously. Like you're clearly, my pleasure, but like my care was his responsibility. And
that's cool.
And it was like beautiful. Like I've actually never heard a man voice that before in that way. Like it made me want to cry. Like it was beautiful. It was so lovely. And so like, first I was like, thank you. Like, I want to acknowledge that. Like, that's a beautiful thing. And that does, hearing that, like, I felt so cared for. And then, but the second piece of it, I was like, don't worry about hurting me or messing up. Like, that's part of the process. Like if something doesn't feel good, I'll be like, hey, like we need to stop that, or we need to shift. Like, I'm not going to blame you. And he voiced his opinion that like, if he does one thing wrong, it messes everything up. Like it messes up the whole evening,
right?
Or it messes up the whole experience. And I was like, no, like there's only one way we can learn, and it's exploring. And and every moment is different. Even if we're doing something we've done before, it's still different. My body's slightly different than it was before. Like we're bringing different energy to it. So like, that's okay. Like, please keep that level of attunement and that mindfulness and that care and that like, sort of protective, nurturing energy is lovely, because I can like surrender to that and really just give of myself, which is like a beautiful experience for me as a woman.
Yeah. And that's cool too. That's super. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, I know. And I was just going to say, and don't hold yourself to such a high level. Don't have fear around that.
Yeah.
Stay in that level of presence and know that it's organic and it's changing, and we're a team in this. And I'm not going to blame you. And if something's not quite right, it doesn't mess things up. We're just going to talk about it. We're going to shift, and then we're going to move on with more information.
And what's so cool about that is that's such a healthy way. It's kind of funny because we do that in so many ways in our lives where we're, if someone messes something up, like if you go to a coffee shop and they mess up your drink, right? Like, what do? You don't take the coffee cup, slam it down, cause a huge thing in a coffee shop and like, what the hell? This is supposed to be a decaf vanilla latte and you guys messed it up.
You ruined my goddamn day.
You ruined my week. This is the worst thing. I spent $3 on this thing. You guys are horrible. You don't. You walk up to the counter and say, hey man, this is supposed to be decaf. And they make you another one, and everybody goes on with their day and everything is fine. Right. And it's interesting how we can be so easy about that in certain aspects of our life, but in certain other aspects of our life, it's way more challenging. So I think that's a really important lesson for people, is like to create that safe space where, you're okay with it not being perfect and making mistakes and, trying new things. I mean, I think that's really key. And I think that is such a great lesson for people, probably people who are in, who've been in, especially for people who've been in longer relationships who feel stagnated, or, they feel like the relationship is in a rut or whatever. Along those lines, what do you think? And I know I've got like 2 more questions for you, and then I'll let you go. Otherwise I could talk with you all day long, as you know. What are a couple of ways couples who've been in relationships for a long time, what can they do to rekindle that intimacy and that mindful sexual relationship?
I mean, everything we've been talking about here. Good.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, well, those 5 things.
Yeah, right. Having those conversations, creating a safe space. I think, approaching the conversation of like, hey, so I think, we both know we're struggling with this. I think we both have some bad feelings around it. Can we schedule a time that we're just create a safe, non-judgmental space for each other? Let's just say it's only 45 minutes. We're not trying to fix our problems in that time period, but just to get the conversation started at least. Yeah. And to sit down and then, like I said, hash out, start reading that book, hash out those questions that I posed already. Take the 5 love languages quiz and talk about that. Look up, you can Google online, I guarantee if you Google like questions to help couples be, more sexually intimate, you're going to find some really interesting things on there.
Right.
So just, I'd say start the conversation, but be very intentional that you're not bringing it up in a fight or an argument or when you feel rejected. Or, like when you're on a vacation and your expectations are high, right, but you're still going to be really sexual when you haven't been for the past 8 months, right? Create a safe, intentional space to have these conversations. That matters, so that both of you are coming in with the best of intention to not get defensive and to not lash out and to not shut down. And
what's cool about that, what you're saying about that, which I think is super cool, is that it seems like most of those conversations unfortunately take place in the moment, in the heat of the moment. Yeah. And that is like the wrong time to do that. It is the wrong, like if you are in the middle of a fight, it is the wrong time to talk about, something in regards to that fight. It's way better to talk about the issue when you can be level-headed and where you're both not, your triggers aren't flying all over the place.
And I think what happens in those moments, when we were talking before about how, for example, we can be so afraid of messing up in a sexual moment, that's because we have had partners in the past that have reacted really negatively and have created a shame and fear response. Or that's because we have had those blow up conversations where our partner has said things horrible to us that afterwards they're like, I am so sorry I said that, but it still stays with us and it still stings. And then it still, it forms a barrier to our willingness to like take our armor down and just, show up in a really open, vulnerable way. So, we need to be intentional, and that's hard because often these conversations force themselves.
Right.
But like, are we going to let our, sex life and our sex conversations choose us? Or are we going to choose them? Are we going to design them in a way that's actually really mindful and actually sets us up for a chance of success and moving forward and building something new, or just something that's just reactive?
Right. So, and that kind of brings me to my last question. So during this entire conversation, the concept of mindfulness has come up several times, right? And it seems like what you're describing, typically when people think of mindfulness, they think of mindfulness as it relates to either meditation or yoga or, sort of that chop wood, carry water ethos from the Stoics or whatever that I love that stuff. But you're also saying that really can apply or really should apply to your sexual relationship and your intimacy, because it's something that requires thought and it requires soul, and it's just not a physical interaction.
Right. Yeah. So, mindfulness at its core is present moment awareness without judgment. And without
judgment is key. That's key.
Yes. Especially around sexual topics.
Yeah. Oh, without doubt.
So, when we, can reflect on the type of questions that I posed earlier, that's bringing mindfulness to them. That's sitting with what are our beliefs? What are our emotions? Where do we feel hangups? Where do we feel shame and embarrassment and rejection in our body, and be really present with all of that discomfort and awkwardness in the moment. And so until we do that process for ourselves, it's hard to create safe spaces for other people to do that. Yeah. And then it's also hard then to be really present in those really like raw sexual experiences and stay both present to our experience and our pleasure and our needs and our desire, and also fully attuned to our partners at the same time. Like that requires a lot of nuance of awareness and presence, and then recognition of like when our insecurities kick in, when performance anxiety kicks in, when body image kicks in, when, anything, boredom, something,
Right.
And a mindfulness of all of that, and that we don't get swept away from it, that we recognize it, and then we choose to bring ourselves back to the present moment and the connection with the human being that's in front of us.
Wow. You're really blowing my mind. This is awesome. It's so great. Thank you so much for being on here. Where can people find you online?
Well, my main website is drjensden.com. That's my hub for everything. And then, if people like my approach to stuff, like it's really helpful to me if folks follow me on social media and engage in that so that I can have a bigger reach. And, for example, I have my first book that I'm pitching to agents and publishers right now. And the bigger online reach I have, the better chance I have.
Yeah. I will tell everyone, anybody listening,
publisher I want.
Right. Anybody listening, check out her YouTube channel. I'm going to put a link to all your stuff on here.
That would be great. Yeah. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, fantastic. YouTube. Thank you. Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Believe me, if you're going to follow like every meme and every Kardashian thing online, although I'm sure my listeners don't follow the Kardashians.
I don't think so.
My listeners seem to be just awesome. Like I love all of them. They're just fantastic. There's so much. They're just so great. So I think that you guys will really dig Dr. Jenn stuff. It's really cool. And I got to say, so we've got this event coming up in a couple months, the Hero Up Summit. You can check it out at heroupsummit.com, heroupsummit.com. And if you go to heroupsummit.com/hero, you can go and get on the mailing list to learn more about it. But I got to say, I'm so excited for your session at this event. It is going to blow people away. And I'm not even going to get into what it's going to be, and I'm going to leave it in your hands. I just know I just can feel already how awesome it's going to be. So I'm so stoked for that. So thank you for being on today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jim.
As always, I feel like I've got a PhD in how to be a better husband, person, everything else. And this is just fantastic. Awesome.
Thank you so much for your awesome questions too. I really appreciate it.
And thank you guys for listening, and we will talk soon. Hey, thanks for checking out the show today. For show notes, event updates, and tons of other free stuff, check out epicallday.com. And if you would, I would love it if you were able to leave a review on iTunes, as this really helps other people find our show. Thanks a ton. I appreciate you listening, and I'll talk to you soon.